Hello and happy new moon in Sagittarius. I am your host, Naomi, and this is Mosaic in Progress. Before I get started on this episode, I need to issue a trigger warning / content warning again for discussions of mental illness, of trauma, both sexual, physical, childhood trauma, and the like. If I think of any other trigger content warnings as I am recording this, I will post them in the episode notes, so you might want to check those if you think you might be triggered by some of this discussion. Today I am going to talk about a topic that I am asked about a lot, which is shadow work. Shadow work is something that, as a topic with that name, is fairly new in human history, but as a concept has been practiced since the dawn of humanity. Shadow work, with that name, kind of is credited to Carl Jung. Carl Jung says, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. At all counts, it forms an unconscious snag, thwarting our most well-meant intentions." Carl Jung had the idea that the shadow was your unconscious or disowned side of your personality. He said it was born or created in childhood, or handed down to you from your parents, created with trauma. It is essentially the rejected side of yourself, whether that is parts of you that you just can't accept, or trauma and wounds that you have yet to heal and have not accepted as a part of you. The shadow self is the unhealed, unaccepted you. It is the dark side, the hidden side, the parts of you that you don't want to show the world, whether you feel that it is something that you have personally created, or it's something that was handed to you and you don't want people to know it. The shadow is very much a part of you. And rejecting it, avoiding it, hiding it, carries a weight with it that changes how you show up in the world. If you cannot accept yourself and show yourself as fully who you are, then you are only expressing yourself impartially. Expressing yourself partially. And an unwhole expression of yourself leads to expressing yourself in small ways. You don't show up in your fullness. You don't show up in your power. You don't show up with confidence. You don't fully show up as you are meant to be in the world. So the idea behind shadow work is that you are accepting, or working to accept rather, every part of you as it is. It's kind of the idea of taking a journey and looking at a map and knowing where you are. Because you can't get to where you want to be if you don't accept where you are. If you have a map and you have a destination, but you are under the impression that you are in a different location than you are, or you wish to be in a different location than you are, and you are acting as if you are in a different location than you are, then you will never get to the destination you want to arrive at following the map, because your point of origin is wrong. So in order to arrive at the destination you want to be at, you must accept that you are exactly where you are. And changing yourself works in the same way, whether it's changing the entirety of who you are, or growing into what you want to be, or changing the direction of your life. You must first accept that you are exactly who you are. Because anything less than that will lead you to a destination you do not intend to arrive at. One of the things that helped me significantly as I began my journey of shadow work was myths, as we like to call them in Western society. In the societies where they originated, they were not thought of as myths, but truths. In the same way that in Western society, the Bible is regarded as truth. And all of the stories therein are regarded as truth. The story of Inanna, a Sumerian goddess, is an allegory for shadow work. And whether it was intended to be so or not, it works very well to follow a pattern. Inanna was a goddess of heaven and earth. And it's a very interesting myth. And I would like to read a little bit. This is from the Divine Feminine Oracle Guidebook. This oracle deck is by Megan Watterson. And in this guidebook, there is a card for Inanna. And I love the quote that goes along with this card. It says, "I have nothing to hide. I see and accept all that I am." And I really just want to read the part that where Megan Watterson did extensive research for this deck into the goddesses and saints and women that are represented in this deck, and she is far more educated than I am, so I am going to defer to her and not pretend to be anything that I am not. So this is a direct quote from this book. I am reading it. And it says, "Inanna represents the power that comes back to us when we accept and integrate our shadow. Inanna was the most prominent female deity in ancient Mesopotamia. At the height of her worship, around the Uruk period of 4000 to 2000 BCE, temples and shrines dedicated to Inanna line the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Her name is Sumerian for Lady of Heaven. Her temples housed her priestesses, and they each would take a man to bed with them on the spring equinox to reenact the divine marriage or hieros between Inanna and her consort Dumuzi. The hieros is an ancient ritual of uniting the opposites from within, the male and the female, the light and the dark, and most especially heaven and earth. This theme occurs in accounts of Inanna's descent to the underworld to find her sister, Ereshkigal. She must take off an article of clothing at each of the 7 gates so that when she finally reaches her sister, she is naked. And when Inanna ascends, she does so with Ereshkigal's power." So what she doesn't delve into in this is that Yes, she took off an article of clothing. Inanna descended to the underworld to find her sister Ereshkigal, it's very interesting if you read into the myth. Ereshkigal was her sister and was her somehow at the same time. It's a representation, in a way, of her shadow. And as she descends into the underworld, she descends in her queenly garb, decked out. And at each gate, they're like, take something off. Take something off. And she starts to kind of question her decision at each gate. Like, this is requiring a lot more sacrifice than I thought. This is requiring a lot more vulnerability than I thought. By the time she arrives at the underworld, she is naked. The queen of heaven and earth is naked to visit her sister. Ereshkigal just laughs at her and kills her. Hangs her, and she is dead in the underworld for 3 days, and then resurrects herself and arises with the power of both the underworld and her previous power. I love the myth of Inanna because prior to learning about Inanna, I identified so much with the myth of Persephone. The myth of Persephone, the goddess Persephone, is based on Inanna. And there's not really any arguing that. If you look at the myths, they're the same. They're altered slightly. The difference with Persephone is Persephone was drug into the underworld. She was kidnapped, she was taken, she was tricked. And I identified with that so much for a long time because she was essentially raped. The myths don't present it that way. It has never been thought of in that way, but essentially Persephone gained her power of both light and dark, death and life, because she was raped, because she was taken, because she was drugged against her will into the darkness. And I felt that so much in 2011 after I was sexually assaulted, just feeling that unwilling dragging into the darkness and having to face every bit of who I was and remake myself. It is a powerless feeling. That kind of shadow work is daunting because it's forced upon you. I love the myth of Inanna because she was not forced into anything. She chose to humble herself, to make herself vulnerable, to descend into the darkness, into the unknown, into the ugliness. And she did it because she said she knew if she did, she would come back with all of the power. And she did. And it's interesting because Ereshkigal says no one comes down here and lives. And they didn't. And Inanna did not. She went down and she died. And there is an interesting correlation between death and change. If you read tarot at all or dabble in tarot at all, you will see, as you study the meanings of the card, the death card, everyone gets very scared of the death card. The death card is just a change. It's a transition. Everything's going to get shaken up, and it might be bad in the shaking up, but it's making way for a rebirth. It's making way for newness. Death is not the end. It is a transition. And if you are living a very full life, You will die so many times before your life on this earth ends. And that, to me, is one of the beautiful things about the myth of Inanna, is that she was not forced into her death. She didn't happen upon it by accident. She chose it. She knew it would give her more power. And so she chose it. And that is what shadow work is. Choosing to die to the you that needs to die. Because we all have parts of ourselves that need to die and be reborn, that need to grow, that need to evolve. This is what shadow work is. And the thing that comes out of it is a wholeness, is a power. Because once you have confronted your deepest, darkest, ugliest self, your demons, no one can hold them against you. Once you've looked in the mirror and seen every ugly piece of yourself and said, that is me, I accept that's me, no one can hold it against you. Which is why Inanna is seen as such a powerful goddess, which is why Persephone is seen as such a powerful goddess, which is why the high priestess in the tarot deck is portrayed as sitting between the black and the white column, between the darkness and the light. She is balanced between the two. She has accepted every part of herself, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful, the light, the dark, and she is sitting squarely in the middle of them, sitting in all of her power, because she has accepted every bit of who she is. So that's the philosophy behind shadow work. But how do you do it? I get asked this all the time. How do you do shadow work? And it's such a very difficult question to answer, because it's different for every situation, for every person, and for every shadow that you have. It's different. For me, when I chose to do shadow work without knowing that I was doing shadow work after I was raped in 2017, I sat for an hour every morning and let myself feel everything that I felt about what happened. And I did that for over a year, which sounds like a long time probably, but it was necessary and it was needed, and it became much less so about what had happened to me and more about my growth and healing other things as time progressed. But in the initial first few months, I just sat and felt angry, or I felt sad, or I felt angry and sad, or I felt confused, or I felt hurt, or I felt the weight of the injustice of what had happened to me and being abandoned by the justice system, which honestly was more painful than the actual event. That is a really good way to do shadow work if you just need to feel your feelings. If you are not accepting of your feelings, if you push your feelings down, if you don't allow yourself to feel whatever you feel about a situation, that is an excellent way to do shadow work. Just sit and feel whatever you feel, without judgment, without trying to drink it away or medicate it away or distract yourself from it or rationalize it away or change it to just say, I am sad and it's okay for me to be sad. I am angry, and it's okay for me to be angry, or whatever you feel. And that was huge for me, growing up in a house where I was not allowed to feel any emotion except happy all the time. It was huge for me to say, I'm sad, and it's okay for me to be sad. I'm angry, and it's okay for me to be angry. I have a right to be sad. I have a right to be angry. These are normal, human, very reasonable emotions for what happened to me. Was huge, and I had to talk myself through them almost every single day, saying, yes, I have a right to be angry. I had something horrible happen to me in my own home, in my own bed. I was violated. My safety was violated. I don't feel safe here anymore. I have a right to feel those things. There's nothing wrong with me for feeling those things. It is normal for me to feel those things, and I am okay for feeling those things. I accept that I feel those things. And that sounds so almost toddler-like as I say it out loud. But sometimes you have to reparent yourself. And I started the journey of reparenting myself that year because I realized I had two very ill-equipped parents. One who was a narcissistic abuser, and one who had been abused her entire life by her parents and then by her husband, and had never developed the emotional maturity to be able to be a parent. And so no one was there to tell me feelings are just feelings. You just feel them, and that's that. You don't have to push them down. You don't have to hide them. You don't have to ignore them. You don't have to try to pretend they're not there. You can just feel them, and that's okay. And some emotions just need to be felt. You just feel them and let them work their way through, and then you move on. Suppressing emotions, especially big emotions over big things, only leads to really bad consequences later on, whether it's in your body or in your psyche. The body keeps the score, and the mind doesn't forget. It will be tucked somewhere in your subconscious, whether you consciously remember it or not. And if you don't let yourself feel what needs to be felt about a horrible traumatic event, you will deal with it later. And so that for me was the beginning of my shadow work, just letting myself feel what I felt and accepting it. And I find it very interesting when I look at our society, how much we hate, quote, negative emotions. We don't like sadness. We don't like anger. We don't like grief. We don't like feelings of frustration with injustice. Positive vibes only. I have come to absolutely hate that expression, because not everyone, but so often it is used as just this toxic positivity to drown out the very necessary darkness that does exist. Sometimes you have to be sad. Sometimes you have to be angry. Sometimes you gotta be a negative vibe. If from a strictly biological perspective, if we were only positive, the world would not exist. You have to have positive and negative ions. You have to have positive and negative energy. If you only have positive energy, you don't have a world. You have an explosion. And I think so much when I look at this about my Aunt Polly. And Aunt Polly, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry for using you as an example without your permission. But my great aunt lost her husband. It's been almost 20 years ago now. No, it's been more than 20 years ago now. Time gets away. They were married for over 40 years. And I remember her coming to visit and talking about her friends, telling her after about a month. He'd been dead about a month. And her friends were telling her, that she needed to stop being sad. She needed to move on. She needed to get on with her life. And they were trying to get her to date. Over 40 years of marriage. That was most of her life. Most of her life was being his wife. Was sleeping next to him. Was making his meals. Was washing his clothes. Was sitting next to him in the evening and watching TV. Was drinking coffee with him in the morning. And he was just gone. And within a month, she was just supposed to be over it. And as young as I was at the time, I remember thinking how horrible that was. And what an awful mentality and what a cruel thing to say to someone who you consider a friend, to just move on and just get over it. Because that was a life. It was his life. But in a way, it was hers too. And she had every right to grieve and to mourn for as long as she needed to. And you don't have to just move on. There are some things that are a mark in your life, that there is a before and there is an after. And the after is never going to look the same as the before. And there's no going back. There's no back to who you were before. Because the you who was before is no longer in existence because of that mark and the after. Another way that I have found interesting to do shadow work is conscious exposure to discomfort. And I was thinking about this the other day, because about a week ago, a week to the day, today, I got a new tattoo. It's not my first tattoo. It's not my second tattoo. I think this is number 13, 12, 13, something like that. Absolutely beautiful tattoo that I had done as a memorial for my son, who I miscarried in 2020. And tattoos are painful. I'm not going to be one of those people who's like, no, it's fine, it doesn't hurt. No, they hurt. They do. Anyone who tells you that they don't is either lying or has lost their sensory, surface sensory system. They're painful. I have always been very good at sitting for tattoos, and when they start hurting really bad to where I can't ignore it, I focus on my breathing, and I say to myself in my head over and over, pain into pressure, pain into pressure, pain into pressure. It's not pain, it's just pressure. It's not pain, it's just pressure. And I'm normally very good at that. I was not very good at that with this tattoo. And Deech, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry I did such a bad job sitting for you on that tattoo. I was very squirmy, and I don't know what was going on that I couldn't sit still that day. It may have just been the weight of the tattoo that it was for my son, who I lost. And I know it will be the last baby that I give life to. Because I found out recently that I can't have children. And that is why I've had 2 miscarriages. And I will be getting a hysterectomy soon. And so, sitting there with that and marking that with all of the weight of that on my arm, I think it was more mentally than I could sustain physically. And it kind of overrode my normal coping mechanisms. But a tattoo is one way. You know, there's different cultures and societies and belief systems where people will do painful things just to elevate their mind above their physical body, like walking on hot coals or laying on a bed of nails and things like that. You expose your body to a physical pain to elevate your mind above it. This is a form of shadow work. It is a managing of your emotions and a managing of your coping and forcing yourself into a situation that most people would not intentionally choose for the purpose of elevating yourself, which is what shadow work is. Again, just sitting with the discomfort. If you can sit with the physical discomfort, it strengthens you to sit with the emotional discomfort, because our society really, really doesn't like discomfort. We want to drink away and drug away and medicate away any kind of discomfort that we have. We want to distract ourselves with phones and TV and streaming services and whatever else that we can put in front of our face or into our body to not feel the discomfort. We can't stand it. And I want to pause here because I don't want this to be misconstrued to say that I think that people who need psych meds should not take them. I absolutely believe that you should take whatever medication you and your doctor determine that you need, and that is necessary. And I have personally taken medication that was absolutely necessary, but backing up to when I was raped, I spent 3 days in an inpatient psychiatric facility about 2 weeks after it happened, because I didn't want to live anymore. And I had quit taking all of the psych medications that my psychiatrist had carefully prescribed one at a time and slowly titrated up to a dose that was good for me. I stopped all of them cold turkey, and yes, I did go through withdrawal. And by the time that I was in the psych facility, I didn't have any more of the medication in my system. It had long been worn out, and they started me back on the doses that I was on. And not only that, they wanted to increase some of my medications that were completely out of my system. I remember them saying, we want to increase your Buspar, which, if you're not familiar with that, is an anti-anxiety medication. The reason they wanted to increase it is because I said I was having trouble sleeping and eating. And they said, well, we need to give you some more medicine then. And as much as I realized that they were just doing their job and they thought that that would be an effective strategy and solution for me, I was raped in my bed in my apartment. If I was sleeping fine and not worried, it would show a complete detachment from reality, bordering on psychopathy. And instead of recognizing that I was having a reasonable and rational response to a horrific trauma and threat to my safety that may or may not have been over, they just wanted to give me drugs. And I think that certain providers, not all, but certain providers and people in general default to that. Having bad feeling must have more meds. This feels bad, need to go get prescription. And this is the opposite of what the body and mind needs. It's very different if you're having unreasonable feelings or having feelings that you absolutely cannot cope with, you can't function with. But that again gets to our problem we have as a society. Because if someone was in a horrific car wreck and broke 27 bones in their body, no one would say, "You're gonna be at work tomorrow, right?" No one would be expecting them to just show up and keep living their life normally until they were healed. But we lose our spouse of 40 years, or we're raped in our home, and that the effect that has on our mind, on our heart, on our psyche is the exact same as the effect that is on our body of a horrific car wreck. And for some reason, as a society, we've decided that you don't really need your mind fully in the game, and you can just push through that. And so we've told people they don't really need time off. They don't really need time to heal. Just push through, just keep going, and you'll be fine. And we hurt ourselves individually, collectively, by not acknowledging the need to take time to feel, to heal. Taking a little bit of a different direction beyond trauma healing, shadow work is sometimes just facing your ugly, awful demons. The really bad parts of you that you don't want anyone to know about. The part of you that wants to stalk your ex-boyfriend's new woman on Facebook constantly. The part of you that decides that someone else is prettier than you and you're going to just make fun of her constantly to other people and in your head. The part of you that wants to pick fights for absolutely no reason other than the drama of it with your partner. The things that are unacceptable, that may be rooted in trauma and may not be rooted in trauma. The things about you that just aren't that great. The things that you don't want other people to know about. Sometimes you just have to sit and look in the mirror with no filter, with no makeup, with no perfect angle, and just look at yourself and acknowledge who you are. I'm the person who can't stop looking at my ex's new girlfriend's Facebook. I'm the person who can't stop obsessing over my partner's ex-girlfriend because I think she's prettier than me. I'm the person who picks fights for no reason because it's been like 2 weeks since we had a fight and I need some excitement in my life. Or whatever. I'm the person who can't clean my room even though I'm almost 30 years old and have kids and other people are depending on me because I would rather check out and play video games or run around with my toxic boyfriend than actually focus on what needs to be done because I can't stay in reality. Whatever it is, whatever your ugly, unacceptable characteristic is, sometimes you just have to sit and look at it in all of its ugliness and say, yup, that's me. That's me. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to pretend that it's something else. I'm not going to pretend that it's someone else. I'm not going to blame anyone else. Because maybe I developed that because of something else. Maybe my parents didn't love me enough. Maybe I was abused as a child. Maybe I had a really toxic relationship and my ex just did such a number on me that I don't know how to connect with people anymore. But it's me. It's me, and I'm owning it. I am taking responsibility for it because whatever reason it developed, it's my responsibility now. It's me now, and I accept that it's me, and I accept the responsibility of those actions and that characteristic, that personality trait is me. And you have to be honest with yourself because sometimes, yeah, it is that your parents didn't love you and you never learned how to connect with people. And sometimes it is that you had a toxic ex. And sometimes it is that you went through a horrific trauma. And sometimes it's just your personality. And it's not fun for you to have to deal with whether or not it's something that you were responsible for creating or someone else handed to you. The fact is, it's yours now. It's you now. And you have to be honest with yourself about that. You have to look in that mirror and say, this is me. This is who I am. Because whether it's trauma or not, the responsibility for your healing and growth rests squarely on your own shoulders. It's no one else's responsibility to heal you. It's no one else's responsibility to help you grow. It is entirely yours. And whatever was given to you with good intentions or ill intentions or selfish intentions or thoughtlessly that has become a part of your shadow, it is now your responsibility. And this is shadow work. Owning that part of you and taking responsibility for it. It is certainly not an easy task. It's ugly, it's uncomfortable, it's awful. I talk a lot about how I just sat for an hour every morning for over a year, which sounds very passive and mundane and not that hard. And I will tell you, unequivocally, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was miserable. I hated every minute of it. I didn't want to do it. Every second I was there, I just wanted to check out. I wanted to play on my phone instead and text people and watch videos and anything but that. I wanted to get drunk and not feel the feelings. I wanted to not cry almost every day. But it was the best thing that I ever did for myself. And in a way, it was the best thing that I ever did for the world that I show up in, the people around me, and the people that I influence. Because had I not done it, I would still be the person running from my feelings, terrified to feel the horrific weight of the pain that I had. One of the things that kind of triggered that, and I guess I'm just going to be doing book recommendations through every episode. It was not intentional, but it seems to be happening. I read Rachel Hollis's book, Girl Wash Your Face. And whatever you think of Rachel Hollis, just set aside and listen to this part of it. She talked in her book about dealing with some trauma she had experienced as a child and having these intrusive thoughts. And she was seeing a therapist, and her therapist told her, set aside time every single day, set a timer for like 5 or 10 minutes, and think about that horrible trauma. And she said, that seems like a terrible idea. And he said, no, trust me, it's going to work. And it did. When she knew that she would take time to process through thinking about what she had went through, the intrusive thoughts stopped. And reading that is why I chose to do the practice that I did with taking an hour every day. And I would sit there, and it wasn't just passively sitting for an hour. Part of it was. But I journaled. Whatever thoughts I had, I would journal them out. And I would take time to read. Some of it was Rachel Hollis's book, and it was other books I read. Aphrodite's Daughters by Jalaja Bonheimen. I am so sorry if I mispronounced your name. And the myth of Inanna is actually mentioned in there, which is the first that I heard of Inanna. I would read something that I felt like would elevate me, something that would help me grow, something that would bring some positivity into my thought processes, and it wouldn't just leave me with, and I'm sad. Something to kind of transition the narrative from I'm hurting to I'm healing. I would absolutely do it again if I had the chance to go back and change things. I would 100% do it again. However, I am not going to pretend like it was a simple thing or an easy thing or in any way a passive act, because confronting your most painful emotions and your deepest fears and the ugliest parts of yourself is a difficult task. There is a reason why the myths that are allegories for it are death. Because it feels like dying. And in a way, I did. Because the me who was before that is not the me who I am now. I definitely emerged from that a completely different person. So, shadow work. It's a big buzzword in the new age or esoteric community these days. Everyone talks about shadow work. No one really knows how to do it. And most of the things that I see regarding shadow work are pretty superficial. So if you want to do shadow work, if you feel called to it, and you don't know where to start, I would invite you to pay attention the next time you feel triggered. When you feel a very strong emotion that may be disproportionate to the situation, or may not be disproportionate to the situation, I invite you to explore it. Just sit with it. Allow it to be. Ask it what it wants to tell you. Because emotions are nothing more than weather vanes to tell us what is going on and what we need to pay attention to. I hope this episode has been beneficial for you. I hope I have brought something good into your life by the listening of it. And I hope you will join me on our next episode as we continue to create together our mosaic in progress.